Hi there, boys and girls, and welcome to another grammar review lesson with me, Teacher Donald. This grammar review lesson is for Unit 6 of our Grammar Goals book. Now, in this unit, we're talking about reported questions. But what are reported questions? Well, I hope you know what a question is. So let's pretend A asks B a question, like, what is 2 plus 2? Now, a reported question is when B will tell C A's question. A asked me what 2 plus 2 was. And then maybe C will think A needs help. So B is using a reported question. Now, some things to remember when we're using reported questions. Number one, the tense moves back. So in the example I just showed you, what is 2 plus 2? A asked me what 2 plus 2 was. So is a present verb, and we have to move it back to the past. So here's another example of when we move the tense back. So the question is, what is a moth? That's a present simple question. Now, in the indirect or the reported question, Donald asked what a moth was, and the verb will come after the subject. So when we move the tense back, am, is turns into was, are turns into were. Simple present will go into the simple past, like eat will turn into ate, and can will turn into could. Now, here's another thing to remember. Number two, the subject before the verb in the reported question. So in this question, what is a moth? The verb is comes before the subject, a moth. But in the indirect or the reported question, Donald asked what a moth was. The verb was comes after the subject. So you're moving the verb after the subject. Here's another thing to remember, no auxiliary verbs. So in the indirect question, you're not going to use do, does, or did. So a question like, how many legs does a moth have? Donald asked how many legs a moth had. We don't need does, do, or did. Those are auxiliary verbs, and we don't use them in the indirect question. But you still have to move the verb back, so have turns into had, and then the subject actually stays in the right spot here. So how many legs does a moth have? Donald asked how many legs a moth had. So no auxiliary verbs. And another thing, an easy one to remember, no question marks. So how many legs does a moth have? That's a question. But in the indirect or the reported question, Donald asked how many legs a moth had. We do not use the question mark. So remember, no question marks. So the tense moves back, the subject comes before the verb, there's no auxiliary verbs like do, does, or did, and no question marks. Now, there are some other kind of questions that are a little bit trickier in reported yes or no questions. So when the answer to a question is yes or no, the tense still moves back, the subject comes before the verb, and we can use if or whether before the subject. So you can use if or whether. I usually use if a lot more, but you could also use whether. So here's a direct yes or no question. Do moths eat other bugs? So the answer would be yes or no. Now in the indirect or reported question, Donald asked if. Now in this spot you could use whether. So Donald asked if, or Donald asked whether, moths, and we move the tense back, so eat will turn into ate other bugs. And the subject is moths, so the verb is coming after the subject. Donald asked if moths ate other bugs. Good job. Now let's play a little game. What did John ask Donald? So here's John's question. What do monkeys eat? Now, can you give me the reported question? So John asked Donald, what? What do monkeys eat? So can you finish the reported question? Say it out loud. What do monkeys eat? John asked Donald what monkeys ate. So we got to move that verb back, and we're not using the auxiliary verb, do. You don't need to use that in the reported question. Here's another question John has for Donald. Why can't we live on Mars? So John asked Donald, finish it. Do you know how? Why we couldn't, so can't turns into couldn't, live on Mars. John asked Donald why we couldn't live on Mars. Let's try another one. Why is the sun so hot? Go ahead and finish this reported question. So John asked Donald why the sun was so hot. So the is will turn into was. And now it's coming after the subject, the sun. Here's another one. How far away is the moon? So John asked Donald how far away the moon was. So the is will turn into was, and it has to come after our subject, the moon. And here's another one. Is the earth heavy? Now this will be a reported yes or no, so be careful. You have to use if or whether. So John asked Donald if the earth was heavy. Or instead of if, you could use whether. So is the earth heavy? John asked Donald if the earth was heavy. So the subject is the earth. We put the verb after the subject and we move the tense back. So is turns into was. Can a shark eat a whale? What's the reported question? John asked Donald whether sharks could eat a whale, or whether a shark could eat a whale. Good work. Now let's play another game. What was Shooky's question? So I'm going to show you the reported question, and this time you have to give me what Shooky's question was. So we're going to do the opposite of the previous game. Shooky asked me if I liked BTS. So what was Shooky's question? Do you like BTS? That would be the question. Remember, this was a tricky one because you don't see the auxiliary verb, but this is a present simple question. Do you like BTS? Yeah, they're not too bad. Here's another one. Shooky asked me what a teacher was. So what was the question? What did Shooky ask? Remember, the verb's going to move back in the reported question, so you're going to have to move it forward if it's the real question. What is a teacher? Here's another one. Shooky asked me how many stars there were. So what's Shooky's question? How many stars are there? There are too many to count. Here's another one. Shooky asked me whether we could live on the moon. So you got to do a lot of changing here to move it back to the question. What do you do with could? Can we live on the moon? So this would be a reported yes or no. Shooky asked me whether we could live on the moon. Can we live on the moon? Yes, we can, but we need a lot of supplies. Shooky asked me what an atom was. So what's the question? What is an atom? And an atom is one of the smallest things in the world that make up everything. Shooky asked me why we had to study grammar. What's the question? Why do you have to study grammar? Or why do we have to study grammar? But I don't think Shooky is studying grammar. Good job. Now we're going to do a little quiz time. This question is about dolphins. Now, I show you the question and the reported question. Now choosing the yellow box, the green box, or the orange box at the bottom, which one would you choose to finish this reported question, where that big question mark is? Do dolphins live in groups? He asked blank, dolphins lived in groups. So this is a reported yes or no, so we would use if, of, or do. Of, not of. If, of, or do. The answer is if. He asked if dolphins lived in groups. Let's try another one. This question's about sharks. Blank sharks often attack people? We asked if sharks often attacked people. So would we use did, does, or do? The correct answer is do. Do sharks often attack people? Sharks is the plural, so we're not going to use does. Does is for singulars. So do sharks often attack people? We asked if sharks often attacked people. Now here's one about whales. Can whales see well? She asked whether whales could blank well. See, saw, or sees. What would you use to finish the reported question? The right answer is see. We already changed can to could, so you don't have to change the verb see. She asked whether whales could see well. Here's one about crabs. How do crabs move? He asked how crabs, should we use move, moved, or moves? The right answer is moved. He asked how crabs moved. In the reported question, we have to move the tense back, so move will turn into moved. Here's one about octopuses. How intelligent is an octopus? She asked how intelligent an octopus is, was, or were. The correct answer is was. Is will turn into was, the past tense. And we're not going to use were because the subject is singular. Here's one about squid. Can squids swim fast? The reported question. He asked if squids could, can, or do swim fast. The right answer is could. Can will turn into could. Don't forget to move the tense back. Here's one about sea turtles. Blank sea turtles eat fish? He asked if sea turtles ate fish. So we're going to use does, did, or do to finish the question at the top. The right answer is do. Do sea turtles eat fish? Sea turtles are plural, and it's a present simple question. Eat. Here's one about lobsters. What do lobsters eat? He asked what lobsters eat, ate, or eats. So this is the reported question. The verb has to move back. The answer is ate. He asked what lobsters ate. Here's one about tuna. How fast blank tuna swim? He asked how fast tuna could swim. So to finish this question, would we use could, can, or do? And the right answer is can. How fast can tuna swim? He asked how fast tuna could swim. Ooh, here's one about seahorses. Do seahorses swim backwards? She asked if seahorses swim, swam, or swum backwards. The right answer is swam. Swam is the past tense of swim, and in the reported question, we have to move the tense back. Good job. And that's it for this grammar review lesson. Best of luck with Unit 6. It's kind of a tricky one. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.